Welcome to 6:30 Saturday Night. We're streaming live from the Haven on Vine in Marion, Ohio. And this is the story of Christmas. God chose a simple man and an ordinary girl to be the parents to raise Jesus, to raise the Son of God. That is the reason for the season and the reason that we're here as a church and going online and presenting the gospel. So our mission is simple: to empower people to pray, grow, and serve together, both online and in the community. So with that, let's open this night up with some prayer. Dear God, just thank you for this opportunity to come together as your church and to go online and stream all over the world. I think we hit 4 continents last week, which is just amazing to think about, that this technology didn't exist a few months ago. Just being able to use new methods to present the good news, the message that has never changed. How you can take a simple man and an ordinary girl and use them in such a mighty way. God, I pray you just bless this evening, bless this Christmas week, and as we read more about Mary and Joseph and their journey of faith, help us to grow in your name and just inspire us to go forth and to serve as they served as the adopted parents of your Son. God, help us to be your church now and forever. In your name, amen.
Higher than the mountains Everybody falls sometimes. Gotta find the strength to rise from the ashes and make a new beginning. Anyone can feel the ache. You think it's more than you can take, but you're stronger than you know. Don't you give up now. The sun will soon be shining. You gotta face the clouds to find the silver lining. I've seen dreams that move the mountain. Hope it doesn't ever end, even when the sky is falling. I've seen miracles just happen. Silent prayers get answered. Broken hearts become brand new. That's what they can do. It doesn't matter what you heard. Impossible is not a word. It's just a reason for someone not to try. Everybody's scared to death when it's time to take that step. The water, it'll be alright. Life is so much more than what your eyes are seeing. You will find your way if you keep believing. I've seen dreams that move the mountains. Hope it doesn't ever end, even when the sky is falling. I've seen miracles just happen. Silent prayers get answered. Broken hearts become brand new. That's what we can do. Overcome the odds. You do have a chance. What we can do when the world says you can't. We will tell you that you can. I've seen dreams that move the mountains. Hope this doesn't end, even when the sky is falling. I see miracles just happen. Silent prayers get answered. Broken hearts become brand new. That's what faith can do. That's what faith can do. Even if you fall sometimes, you will have the strength to rise.
That's a perfect lead into tonight, because tonight's message is all about faith. You know, every year we talk about the Christmas story and the events leading up to the birth of Jesus. And some years we end with the birth, the baby in the manger. Other years we take it a step further and we end with the wise men and they're presenting the kingly gifts and talking about Jesus as king. And that's what we talked about last week. But at least in my experiences, we rarely take it to the next part of the story, the part of the story where Dorothy took a dark turn, and if we're honest, all of our lives are like that. We all have dark times in our lives that we don't always want to talk about, but we need to in order to grow. So tonight we're going to talk about the flight to Egypt and where Herod kills the children of Bethlehem and ultimately the return to Nazareth. This is the story, part of the story where Mary and Joseph's faith is tested in a very real way. So our big idea is simply that sometimes you have to lose your life to find it. Sometimes you just have to give up in order to move on. And that's what we're going to talk about with Mary and Joseph in this part of their story. We're going to break it down into 3 segments. We're going to be in Matthew 2, verses 13 to 23. So we're going to break it down into 3 segments and then talk about it a little bit. So the first part is the flight to Egypt. Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Rise, take this child and his mother and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." And when he rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." The story doesn't end with the baby in the manger. It doesn't end with the wise men and their gifts. It continues. And Herod, who was the king of the area of Judah, was threatened by this baby that was said to be the king of the Jews, this baby that was said to be the Messiah. And because of his threats, he decided to take action. But God knew this was going to happen. He had a plan. He was in control. And he warned Mary and Joseph to take off to Egypt. They had to give up everything again for Jesus. Remember that Mary becoming pregnant before they were married would have faced a lot of social issues that they would have been looked down on, cut off from maybe their families and whatnot. But this took it to a whole new level. To be gone for that long, they would have been presumed dead. He would have had to given up his business for good, their home, everything that they knew was gone when they decided to go to Egypt. There was no Skype or email. You couldn't call into the office and say, "Hey, take care of my carpentry patrons while I'm gone." They were gone for years, and it would have been presumed that they were killed by bandits or something. So this was a huge step of faith. This isn't just jaunt to Egypt for a couple weeks and head back. Remember, this was before cars. This was before anything. They walked, they hiked across the deserts. So our plans and God's plans don't always line up. When the angels appeared and said that, "Hey, Mary, you're going to have God's Son, the Holy Spirit's going to come upon you, and you're going to give birth to the Messiah." They didn't. If they would have said all this in the front, they might not have been so willing to go along with it. And that's really for us in ministry and Christians as a whole. That's really how it works. That if we knew the whole picture, we might be a little more hesitant because God is the one who sees the big picture, and we have to be able to trust Him. But the bottom line is that God provides. We need to hold on loosely to the things of this world. If you remember what we talked about last week in the wise men and their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, gifts out of the royal treasury from Persia. Those things were great gifts. And it would have been easy for Mary and Joseph to take those things and to hold on to them. But if we read on in the story, we can assume that those gifts would have been used to fund their flight to Egypt. Those gifts were a means to an end. It wasn't about how much stuff they could acquire or how, what people saw them and their kid. It was about trusting God and being obedient and knowing that He was in control and being willing to give up everything in faith. God provides. The second part of the story is where Herod kills the children. Then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious, and he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and in all the region that were 2 years old or younger, according to the time which he had ascertained from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what the what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation. Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they are no more. You see, Herod was afraid of losing power. Now, if you know history, Herod was a pretty good king. He built the second temple in Jerusalem. He built a massive port city that was the capital, Caesarea, of the region. He was known before this to be a pretty good king. He built a lot of amazing structures that were very impressive for that time. But he allowed the power to go to his head. And unfortunately, in history, he is now known for killing children rather than all his great accomplishments. When we become comfortable, that leads to corruption. We need to learn to cling to Jesus rather than to stuff, rather than to the things of this world, rather than to our job titles or power or whatever that we have. Those things are blessings, they're gifts, they're temporary. Our standing with Jesus is what counts. And you can read this story, and it is very natural to ask, how can a good God allow this to happen? And you see it on the news with all these shootings and terrorist attacks. And how can a good God let these things happen? But the answer is in our sin nature, that if you go back to the story of Adam and Eve, they were presented with an opportunity to make a choice, that they could try to be God-like rather than like God. To be like God is to take on his character, to follow in the footsteps of Jesus, to be loving and compassionate and being willing to serve and to love. To be God-like is to try to hold power for yourself, to control and manipulate people around you. That's what the serpent was trying to tempt Adam and Eve with, and that's what Herod fell trapped to, that he was all about his power, his place, and not knowing that in history he would have been known for a good king, but because he fell to this trap of being corrupted in his own power, in his heart, he's known for killing children. And that's a warning to us all that no matter how much we accomplish, we can still fall if we allow ourselves to get comfortable, if we allow our hearts to be corrupt with the status quo. And taking life is in all forms. It's not just in killing babies. If you're in management or whatever and you have people working under you, do they fear you or do they respect you? Anytime you make a snide comment or tear somebody down, you're taking life out of that person. And that's what we do when we're insecure. That's what we do when we're trying to hold on to our power, trying to hold on to our comfort. We tend to tear people down rather than build them up. But Jesus says in the Gospels that he came to serve rather than to be served. Jesus, the Son of God, the only man to walk this earth and never sin. If he came to serve rather than to be served, then who are we to put ourselves above others? We need to take on the heart of Christ and serve the people around us, to love them as ourselves, and to love God with everything we have. We're called to be like God, like Jesus, not to be God-like. We can't let our comfort corrupt our hearts. The third part of the story for tonight is the return to Nazareth. But when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, Rise, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead. And when he rose and took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel, but then he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of his father Herod, and he was afraid to go there. Being warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee. And he went and lived in a city called Nazareth, so that what was spoken by the prophets might be fulfilled, that he would be called a Nazarene. Like Job and Abraham before him, Joseph's life was more than restored by God in the end, that his faith was rewarded. Joseph pretty much disappears from the narrative from here on out, but we do know a few things about what happened next. We know that Nazareth was near a town called Capernaum, which was a rather large Roman city, a crossroads of trade, and that Joseph, being a carpenter, would have had a good base of business there, and Jesus, his son, working alongside him. We know that he had a growing family and many brothers and sisters of Jesus that would appear later in the Gospels. And we know that at least two of them, James and Jude, not only would grow up to be leaders in the early church, but also write books of the Bible. And then, of course, the blessing of having Jesus as your son, the perfect son. That there's no bigger blessing than being able to see Jesus grow up, I'm sure. I can only imagine what that would have been like. You see, it's all about obedience or rebellion. We're all faced with this choice. Joseph chose obedience, and he was rewarded. Our culture today tends to lift up people who rebel. We lift up the radicals. We lift up the people who are willing to stick it to the man, if you will. But we're called to be obedient to God and to his will and to his plan. If you study literature, all the great heroes, they do what is right no matter the cost. And that's Joseph. He was willing to do what was right. He was willing to stick by Mary. He was willing to raise Jesus, to give up everything, to flee to Egypt to keep him safe. That is his story, and we can learn from it. Joseph may disappear from here, but if someone said about me or any of us that all people would know about you in the future is that you were obedient to God and you were a good husband, a good parent, that's more than what can be said about most people. That is what it's about. It's the little things, being obedient to God, doing the right thing for the right reasons, no matter the cost. That's what we are called to do, and we need to be willing to step out into faith, not to be afraid, because God is in control. We can't always see the big picture, but God can, and we need to trust him. So in conclusion, like Joseph, sometimes we have to lose our life to find it. Are we willing to give up everything for Jesus like he was? Remember, this was a baby. God said, the angel showed up. This is the King of Kings. This is the Messiah you've been waiting for. But he was still a baby. To be able to take that leap of faith must have taken great courage. And for us today, we know this rest of the story. We know who Jesus grew up to be. He is the King of Kings. He is the Lord of Lords. And he is coming back again soon. So we need to be willing to give up everything for him, because he gave up everything for us. Are we committed to building others up rather than tearing them down? Are we going to be people who take life from people around us? Or are we going to be known to give life, to breathe life into our communities, into our families, into our workplaces and our schools? We're called to be salt. We're called to be light. We're called to be people of the Word and people who are known for their love and their service. And are we willing to do what is good and right no matter the cost? Are we willing to step out in faith this next year and let this be the year of the church? Let this be the year that we are no longer afraid of our faith, that we are no longer afraid to love people and to put ourselves out there and to be willing to walk away from stuff and situations that are holding us back. We need to be people of faith. We need to be willing to put everything aside to serve Jesus, to fulfill the callings in our hearts. None of us are going to be called to raise the baby Jesus. That is, I can't imagine what that would have been like for Mary and Joseph. But we have all been called to do something, just to be good parents, good role models, good employees, good managers. Wherever we are, we're called to be witnesses and we're called to be ambassadors. So let this Christmas season be a new beginning for the church. Let this Christmas season be a new beginning for each and every one of us. And I pray just that God starts a revival in our hearts. Wherever you're watching from tonight, let this be your time to be the light that your community so desperately needs. Let's pray. Dear God, I just thank you for who you are as our loving Father and how you sent your Son to be born in a manger, to struggle and to face hardship and to know what it means to be human. I just thank you for Jesus and for his sacrifice, the one who was born to die. who lived a life perfect, no sin, and then died on a cross for our sin, to take on our punishment, and to not only that, but then rise from the dead, to conquer sin and death forever. God, Jesus is the one that is worth following. He is the one that is worth giving everything up for. Let us learn from the story of Mary and Joseph to be not just admirers of their faith, but to imitate their faith, to learn from their faith, to grow from their faith. Help us to be people of faith. Help us that when people see us, they see you, not just this Christmas season, but into this new year, God. Help us to be your church. Pour out your Spirit. Help us to be your hands and your feet. Help us to go forth and to pray to you, to grow in your Son, and to serve with your Holy Spirit wherever we go. In your name we pray. Amen.
You are my Father, your Son, He is our Savior. Hear now our prayer, for you are You are good, when there's nothing good in me. You are love on this paper I see. You are light, you are darkness bruises in. You are hope, you have covered all my sins. You are peace when my fear is crippling. You are true, even in my wondering. You are joy, you're the reason that I sing. You are life, in you that the lost its sting. Oh, I'm running to your arms, I'm running to your arms. The riches of your love will always be enough. Nothing compares to your embrace. Light of the world, forever reign. You are more than my words will ever say. You are Lord, all creation will proclaim. You are here, in your presence I'm made whole. You are God, over us I'm letting go. I'm running to your arms, the riches of your love will always be enough. Nothing compares to your embrace. Light of the world, forever reign. My heart will sing, no other name. Jesus. 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 your arms. The riches of your love will always be enough. Nothing compares to your embrace. Light of the world,
Hey, thanks for tuning in. Just another great night of being able to worship God. You know, our mission is to empower people to pray, to grow, and to serve together, both online and in the community. And one of the main components of serve is what we call Fifth Saturdays. It's where every time there's a fifth Saturday in the month, which happens about 4 times a year, our team gets out and does something in the community, and we challenge everyone around us to do the same. The next date is going to be January 30th. And our team's going to get out and hit up as many nursing homes as we can and just share the gift of music with the people there. And I just encourage you that wherever you're watching from, just get together with some other Christians and go do something. The first time we did this, it was just 2 of us picking up garbage in our neighborhood. Just do something small to let your community know that you love them and that Jesus loves them. That's what it's about. That's what it means to serve. So go in peace and join us again Christmas Eve. We're going to have a couple of special broadcasts starting at 5:30 Eastern. So hope to see you then.